It's the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines. For more on the Seminoles, including Osceola's coverage from veteran Seminole insiders, message boards, Osceola virtual happy hours, and more, go to theosceola.com.
Hello, and welcome to the Osceola Seminole Sidelines podcast, which is presented by our new sponsor, Alumni Hall, where you will find officially licensed FSU gear for the entire family. You can visit Alumni Hall at alumnihall.com or visit their Tallahassee store at 1817 Thomasville Road. My name is Patrick Burnham. I'm a football writer for the Osceola and host of Seminole Sidelines. I am joined today by Osceola publisher Jerry Cutts, managing editor Bob Ferrante, and Osceola recruiting analyst Charles Fishbein. Before we get started today, guys, I want to remind our Osceola subscribers you can log on to the Osceola and click on the Alumni Hall ad to receive a 20% discount code for online purchases and your membership card to present for in-store purchases. All right, guys, we've also now been joined by our fifth member of our panel, former FSU offensive lineman Mark Salva. So, guys, welcome back to Seminole Sidelines.
Good to do this.
Well, I remember Skip Holtz used to tell us every year at South Florida the shelf life of any one football team is exactly 365 days, and we are officially going to start to see the 2021 team come together when Florida State starts spring practice next Tuesday. And today, Mike Norvell and strength coach Josh Storms met with the media in preparation of the start of spring practice. So, Bob, you sat in on the call, as did I and Jerry. So I want to start with your initial takeaways of Mike Norvell's press conference heading into next Tuesday.
I think, Coach Norvell is going to be mostly positive, as he was. And I think the biggest takeaways, let's start at quarterback, of course. Mckenzie Milton is going to be a full go. And they're excited to see what he can do as far as be a leader, and then on the field, how he throws, how he learns the offense. Chuba Purdy will be good to go. That's another big positive. I think just from a standpoint of being comfortable as a staff and players within the program, it's a big change from 365 days ago, not just because of COVID. You've got some comfort in the personalities, knowing what's expected as a player. Coach Storms talked about that a lot. Players now know what to expect, what the coaches want, what the strength and conditioning guys are asking them to do. It's not building a relationship anymore. It's a true level of comfort. And so I think that's huge moving forward for this program. They have that familiarity now that they didn't have a year ago.
Yeah, one of the things that they asked Mike about was how has growth manifested itself from this time last year to today. And he said the kids just walk through the door differently. And Josh Storms had mentioned that they are now know what to expect in off-season training and in the weight room, and that there's been growth there. Jerry, what were your takeaways from what Mike and Josh had to say?
Yeah, I would agree with that, what you both said, just that there's a level of comfort and of expectations. And I think, the roster flip, you've probably got a bunch of guys in there that are all more on the same page than last year when there was a diversity of buy-in.
Yeah, and, Bob, I want to come back to you on this because you and I talked about it after his opening press conference going into the 2020 season, entering camp. There seemed to be – Mike did not seem to be I don't want to over-dramatize it, but I remember saying to you it was a little bit different the way that press conference went as opposed to his body language and his other press conference. But he truly seemed excited today. He seemed ready to go for spring, as ready as he said he's ever been for a spring practice because of what it means to continuing to build his program. What were your thoughts on his excitement level for this spring?
Yeah, I think they know that they have truly the opportunity to mold. This is not going to be a spring that's going to be cut short as dramatically as last year's. When you only have 3/15 of a spring, that's enormous for a first-year program. As Josh Storms mentioned, they only had 30%, or they lost about 30% of a true strength and conditioning program. I think there's this typical, spring training mentality maybe around college football, not just with Florida State, but other programs. It's that kind of new time to blossom, to see these young players, to see honestly, I think all that strength and conditioning time that was lost last year has now been built in, and it's kind of ramped up. This is the true order of how off-season college football should operate. So I think that's where the excitement comes from. It's just that they've been able to follow a plan that they wish in a perfect world would have existed in 2020, and now it's truly kind of coming to fruition in 2021.
Yeah, I think he mentioned they thought it was important that the staff came back intact. He thought that was an advantage for this particular football team. Jerry, you've talked a lot about staff continuity, and you saw it during the dynasty era. Can you talk a little bit about how you feel about the importance of the entire staff returning for season 2?
Yeah, I really believe in staff continuity. We saw it during the Bowden era where he held everybody together. And your terminology, your language, everybody knows what is expected, and the communication is a lot easier than when you have coaches coming and going and with different philosophies and terminology. I think it's just more consistent, and you get more done. Players know what to expect. There's never going to be an off day. And so I think that's been great. I would have to think, Pat, that these guys, after not having had spring practice last year, they're getting back to spring practice. It'd almost like be a crisp, cool morning in August. You have a little jump in your step. I would just have to think guys are just grateful to be able to go out and practice.
Yeah. Mark, I want to talk to you a little bit about the staff continuity. You were part of a staff at South Carolina that had some changes after year 1 at South Carolina under Brad Scott. I know the offensive coordinator position switched out. I don't know if there were any changes on defense after that first year, but just kind of talk about the importance of staff continuity and the challenges and how that gives them an advantage going into spring ball.
Well, it's hugely important. Just like a player, having a position group that's consistent over an extended period of time, you get a certain rhythm working with somebody. You understand how they do things. You understand maybe how you complement or accentuate somebody else's skill set. And that's real important. I think the longer you're together, the more effective you can be. And it's definitely a huge advantage that these guys are coming back. And not only just for each other, but for the players, because the terminology and the language and again, the rhythm of how a coach operates with each other and with the players is consistent. You know what to expect. And so that's one thing when, you go with a new staff, both as a player and as a coach, and everybody's just kind of trying to figure it out, and we didn't get that last spring. I can't take, how many times did we get on here and say, you know what, we lost spring practice, that the downstream repercussions of that just kept manifesting itself over and over and over again, and now we kind of got that out of the way. Last year was really like a spring practice, and everybody got to know everybody, know how everybody does things, know what the expectations are. And now you go into practice and none of that stuff is an issue. Now you can go and concentrate on the things you need to do, which is to be a better football player and a better coach.
All right, well, let's hop into a little bit about what everyone's talking about around Florida State's football program, and that's Mckenzie Milton. Transferred from UCF, one of the winningest quarterbacks in recent college football history, finished in the top 10 in the Heisman voting in 2017 and 2018, and looks to be the answer to what has been a shortcoming at quarterback over the last couple of years, going back even towards both of Willie's years in Tallahassee, then obviously starting James Blackman this past season. A healthy Mckenzie Milton, I want to ask all four of you, is there any chance that anyone other than a healthy Mckenzie Milton is the starting quarterback at Florida State in the fall?
No chance.
No way.
Bob?
The answer better be no. Let's be honest.
Yep. Jerry?
Yeah, no, if Mckenzie Milton is healthy, he's your starter.
Yeah, and I think we all five are in agreement on that, which brings us to our next point, which I have not heard a lot of conversation about around town, but it's something that Mark and I have talked about off the record, you have one of the most successful quarterbacks over the last 6 years in college football as your number one guy, but you have your most dynamic playmaker on offense from last year's team, Jordan Travis, if Mckenzie is the starter, as a backup. Mark, you and I have talked about it, so I'll let you start with this one. What would you do with Jordan Travis if he is not the starting quarterback?
I would get him on the field. He was our best runner, right?
Yeah, he's got to get the ball 10 to 15 times a game, right? You got to put the ball in his hands.
The guy gets the ball in his hands and he makes things happen, and that is, for a team lacking in established playmakers, he is our most established playmaker. Now you bring in a guy like Milton, who brings what you need at the position of quarterback. He's got to be the guy, but you take Jordan and you figure out ways to get him in the game. You put him at running back, you put him at slot, you put him in with another running back. I mean, you figure out ways, and the guy just makes touchdowns. We didn't have very many last year, and I don't know what percentage of them were his. I think it's probably pretty high. He's a guy you got to get the ball to, so you get him in the game.
Yeah, Fish, what do you think about the quarterback situation?
Well, I mean, Travis is kind of like FSU's version of Hines Ward. For those that remember, Hines was kind of like a quarterback at Georgia and played multiple positions. And he's you could argue that if they didn't play him last year, they may not have beat anybody outside of Jacksonville State. I mean, he was responsible for 3 of the wins, in my opinion. There's no the players like him. I think he's well liked in that locker room and respected. You can't just shelve him and say, all right, well, we're not going to play him. And since Mckenzie Milton has committed to FSU, it feels like the tide of FSU football has changed. I mean, it was like so much negativity around the program. And just look from a recruiting standpoint, like since he's committed, they have gone the opposite way in the program just feels like it took a deep breath, and now he's pumped life back into the program. Like, as a Seminole fan, you got to be excited because there wasn't a whole lot to cheer for last year. He commits, and the next thing you know, you have a lot of positive momentum. And I mean, they won 3 games last year. You wouldn't even know that if you've seen all the momentum that's changed over the last 4 to 5 months since the season's ended. It's been unbelievable.
It'll be interesting to see what they decide to do. I mean, because you got a couple of different options. You can play them at different positions, like a slot or running back, or you could use them kind of like New Orleans uses Taysom Hill, right? You kind of get packages like that where he's a runner and a sometimes thrower, tough, hard runner. So it'll be interesting to see because, a lot of it is going to depend too on Chubba Purdy and Rodemaker. What's their progression look like in the spring? Do you feel good with those guys being your de facto number 2? If something happened to Milton, because of Travis not getting the daily reps at quarterback. So a lot of that's going to depend on the development of those 2 guys too. So it'll be interesting to see what they come up with.
Yeah, and you could tell Mike was very excited about Mckenzie. He said it's been a joy watching him since he's been in the program, that they are going to be smart about how they use him during the spring. He led us to believe that they would pick their spots on when the quarterbacks will be live, but that everyone's got different situations as it pertains to their bodies, and we're going to make sure that we're wise with all of our players. That included Mckenzie, but the Mckenzie looks great. We've seen video of him squatting 300 pounds. Mike mentioned that his change of direction is very good, which is obviously one of the concerns I think you probably have coming off that injury. So I think it's going to be fascinating to see how the quarterback battle plays out. But I think I agree with you. I think that all of you, I think Mckenzie Milton's the guy. I think he's the reason they brought him in here. And I would be surprised if he wasn't the starter. We'll have plenty of time to talk about this over the spring, and I don't want to get into all 10 position groups. But what I do want to talk about is the graduate transfers that they brought in. Mike seemed very pleased with what those guys have added to the program. He mentioned that he thought that they were every bit the fit that he thought they would be when they recruited them into the program. So let's start on offense. You've got Mckenzie Milton, coming in at quarterback, obviously, and you got DJ Williams, who will battle for a running back position. I don't want to do a running back breakdown, but Fish, can you talk about what you think DJ brings to the running back room?
Well, he brings a bigger back, a guy that could kind of, pound the ball between the tackles and move the chains. Last year it seemed like they either had the big play or they had nothing. So he'll at least pick up the 3 and 4 yards, keep them in front of the sticks, and hopefully, Mark will understand this because he played the game. Like, most offenses don't do well in 2nd and long or 3rd and long. Like, you got to stay in front of the sticks, and if you could pick up even 3 yards on 1st down, that's what this guy DJ gives you. He gives you that back that'll pick you up 3-4 yards, and then you have other guys you could bring in, whether it's Coburn, or some of the other backs that have the ability to break the longer runs. But he will be more that consistent runner. He doesn't take a lot of tackles for loss. He gains yards on when he gets the ball. He moves the ball forward. So I think he gives you a power back, and they needed that. A lot of their backs are real small, and I like that they have somebody that they can pound the rock with.
Yeah, and moving over to the defensive side of the ball on the transfers, they really shored up. They lost basically their starting front four from the start of the season with Marvin Wilson, Kando, and J-Rob heading to the pros, and Corey Durden, who was a part-time starter, transfers to NC State. But you bring in Jermaine Johnson from Georgia and Keir Thomas from South Carolina, and Keir's played a ton of football at South Carolina at a very high level. They're both going to be starting, I would imagine, at bookend defensive ends, Fox defensive end for Thomas and strong side defensive end for Johnson. I'll start with you, Jerry, because you're our defensive guy. You love the defensive side of the ball. What do you anticipate seeing from those guys, or how excited are you about seeing what they bring to this defense, and particularly being able to pass rush from their base defense?
Well, I think that's a big key to improvement. We had no pass rush last year. Our defensive ends just didn't have any stats. So if we can create some push from the outside, I think that defensive secondary will look better. So I think that position's really key. I'd almost have to say that is the most important position for improvement on defense.
I think one thing you can say about those two guys is coming from Georgia and coming from South Carolina under Muschamp and Kirby, those guys were coached pretty hard, right? They went through it, and they've been through the war. So bringing that attitude to our defense, I think, is going to be a really good thing. I go back to when Darren Hambrick, who was at Florida, came to us at South Carolina and transferred in. He changed the whole attitude of our defense, just bringing that standard of working,
yep.
And that's something, he can elevated the whole defensive output during practice, during workouts, during the off season. That can't be understated either. I think that's going to play a huge role in how the defense improves over the course of the next several months.
Yeah, and of course in the secondary, which needed some upgrade in personnel, you brought in Jamie Robinson, another South Carolina transfer, and then Brandon Moore, who is coming off an injury at UCF that cost him all of last year and most of the 2019 season. He is a guy that could be a lockdown corner for Florida State. Fish, a little bit about both those guys. What's your anticipation of what those guys can add to the defense this spring and fall?
Yeah, I mean, talent-wise, I think from a depth and talent standpoint, their secondary at Florida State's talent-wise, probably one of the better teams in that ACC, I personally feel. I mean, maybe the guys haven't proven it yet, from Travis Jay to Akeem Dent to the guys that they've brought in. I like the kid from UCF. He was a playmaker. He was aggressive on the defensive side of the ball, had good football instincts. I mean, you watched him at UCF. He made a lot of big plays there. If he could come back and even be 90% of what he was, he'll be a welcome addition. The kid from South Carolina, I mean, Muschamp and T-Rob did a very good job with those guys in their secondary. He's going to be a very important piece. I think if they could get any pressure up front from their front four or five guys up front, the secondary could have a major turnaround this year. It's just they got no help from those guys last year with pressure. And I don't care how good you are in the secondary, guys can only cover for so long, especially in this new day and age of these spread offenses, you can't have your corners and safeties covering for 4 and 5 seconds. Not the way the quarterbacks get rid of the ball. It's just ridiculous. And there's a lot of talent on that back end. And the one thing I think that these guys bring, and the one thing that always made Florida State so special as a program, is that competition. Guys get better when they know there's somebody behind them pushing them. You didn't have that the last 2 years. I felt like a lot of the guys on the team were entitled and felt like, oh, I'm already the starter. There's nobody pushing you. And that's the great teams under Bobby had that. The teams under Jimbo had that. When you have that competition, that guys know that they're not given a starting job and there's 2 or 3 guys that can earn that starting job, that's where they're at in that secondary. I think it's a major, they did a good job adding pieces to that secondary this year.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that's going to benefit the entire defense greatly. And of course, he did allude to the fact that they may not be done in the transfer portal. There may be some additions, and I think we all agree that one of those positions is probably going to be an offensive tackle. And as I wrote in my offensive line preview yesterday, getting a plug-and-play offensive tackle could allow Florida State to do something like move Devontae Love-Taylor when he's healthy inside the guard, or Darius Washington inside the guard, and really significantly impact the production and efficiency of the offensive line. Mark and Fish, do you guys agree with that?
Well, I think that the one position that can alter and improve the offensive line the most is if they get those plug-and-play guys at tackle, because they have enough guys to be good at guard and center. Maurice Smith has already proven himself. Devontae Love-Taylor, when they got him last year, I think we all agreed he was more of a guard anyway than a tackle. Washington's really built more like a guard. These guys aren't 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", long, athletic, that could change a guy's direction and everything with their length. One thing that's difficult is when you're a defensive end and an offensive tackle has length, it's further for that guy to get around him. It makes a big difference. Length can change the game, especially at that position. They don't have a whole lot of that except with their younger guys, whether it's Lloyd Willis, Robert Scott. But you'd rather have to wait on those guys because those younger tackles they brought in weren't ready right away. I spoke to somebody yesterday about Willis. They're really high on Willis, but he's not ready. He's another year and a half away. So if you could bring in an older guy that could come in and still let those guys develop, because the one thing with young players, especially on the O-line, if they get beat up mentally, you may never get them back. So you don't want them to learn all these bad habits and getting beat. Let them sit and learn. Robert Scott, let Willis learn, and then move those better players inside and get a couple older guys that have experience in college football. And I think the overall part of the offensive line will improve greatly.
Mark, Devontae Love-Taylor may be limited somewhat in spring coming off that leg injury from last season. You're an offensive line coach. Can you does that work to your advantage when you have such a young offensive line returning? Devontae's coming back for what will be his 6th season in college football. I would assume they would probably spend they kind of know what they have with him, right? So you would think that they would limit his time in practice coming off injury, even if he was full go. How do you take advantage of that as an offensive line coach?
Yeah, no, you have him there, you keep him around. He maybe could do some individual drills and stuff like that, but to your point, yeah, you want the majority of the live reps going to some of these younger guys and get them experience in some really full speed reps. And there was a time when we had so much depth at FSU that the redshirt seniors wouldn't even practice in the spring; they were excused from spring. And it was all just the younger players. And would love to get back to that point, right? So in that vein, you get those younger guys ready to go, and you give them all the reps. And a guy like him, like you said, you already know what you have. He just needs to get sharp. He'll have camp to get sharp again and recover from his injury.
So, Mark, if Devontae Love-Taylor was able to go in this spring, would you want to take a look at him as a guard, play with him at that a little bit in the spring?
Yeah, I'd throw him in there for sure. Look, you can't have enough offensive linemen. You just can't. And if putting him in there, look, he pretty proved he could play guard. He played a few games at guard already, so we know he can do it. I wouldn't be too concerned with him getting reps other than staying in shape and getting recovered. That would be my focus on him. And I think you could plug and play him pretty much anywhere down the line. And that's a great thing to have. I love to have a putty man where you just fill a hole, with a guy. And he seems like he could be that guy.
Yeah, and we do know that, Alex Atkins, the offensive line coach, is a fan of cross-training, so I think they'll probably give most of the guys a chance to compete at 2 spots during the spring, and should be a very competitive spring on the offensive line, and we can talk about that more as we get into practice. But right now we're going to take a break to hear from our new sponsor of Seminole Sidelines podcast, Alumni Hall, and we'll be back in 30 seconds.
Alumni Hall, where you'll find officially licensed FSU gear for the entire family, including brands like Nike and Champion, plus great gifts for your favorite Seminole and home decor, too. Miss some of the old Seminole throwback logos? Check out our College Vault collection. Shop online at alumnihall.com and let our great customer sales team ship to you within days. Or pick up in store in Tallahassee. You'll find us in the Miracle Plaza Shopping Center on Thomasville Road. Students and military get 10% off in store, and Osceola subscribers get 20% off in store and online with their digital membership cards. Alumni Hall.
All right, welcome back to Seminole Sidelines podcast presented by Alumni Hall. Guys, getting into segment 2 of our show. Like I said, we're going to do a weekly podcast during the spring, so I don't want to run through all 10 positions right now and go through the personnel. We'll have plenty of time to do that. But I do want to ask each of you, which position group on both sides of the ball has to show the most improvement from 2020 to 2021 for FSU to reach whatever its potential is for next season? So, Mark, I'm going to start with you on offense. What position group do you think has to improve the most for FSU to be as successful as it can be in 2021?
Yeah, I know you're probably expecting me to say offensive line, but I'm going to throw you a curveball here, and I'm going to take Jerry's favorite subject, the wide receivers. I think – for us, we need to have, we ran the ball halfway decent last year. I saw great improvement on the offensive line. I'd expect to see that again. But the sheer lack of production from the wide receiver position in all phases of a wide receiver's job, that's route running, catching, blocking, lining up, all those things, they made almost no impact on our offense last year. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. I think the stats probably bear me out on that. So I look at the wide receiver roster and I'm trying to think, where's that production going to come from? And, we got some potential and some guys that I know when they were young players and freshmen that, I was excited to see them develop, but you just really didn't see it. So, you've got Pookie Wilson, you've got, you got Keyshawn Helton coming back. You're looking for some younger guys to maybe to step up and start and be that guy. Poirier, showed some things, but golly, I'd love to see Jordan Young be something. All the reports on Joshua Burrell look really positive, and I liked him as a freshman. He's a big body with really nice hands, but we got to get production out of those guys.
Yeah, I know you and I, all three of us, me, Fish, and Mark, we all three have a favorite freshman receiver coming in, and obviously Destin Hill is not going to enroll till June, but Malik Mclean is here and Josh Burrell is here for spring. And, Mike raved about those guys today when we talked about the freshmen that were in school. And, said Malik Mclean does not look like a freshman receiver, not only in the way he moves, but in his build, and was also very complimentary of Josh Burrell. So, I agree with you. I think maybe the answers might be this freshman class. I know Fish was big on Destin Hill. I mean, he was highly thought of coming out of high school when he signed with Florida State. But, Jerry, what do you think the offensive position that has to show the most improvement for FSU to reach its potential is?
Well, Mark stole my position.
You're gonna have the same one.
Wide receiver. And I would add to, the Robinson kid is somebody that, I'd throw in that mix. We kept hearing great things about him last September, but he never really recovered from that injury. And I think he could be a factor this spring. And I'm hoping that somebody's going to emerge. But, as down as I've been on the receiver position, I wonder how much of it you can attribute to the quarterback. Timing is everything for receivers, and having a consistent ball spinning coming out of there makes being a receiver better. I mean, there's no doubt you can place blame on the quarterback or the receiver corps for a lack of a effective passing game last year. But if Mckenzie, Milton, and the other quarterbacks that will, Tate Rodemaker and Chubba Purdy and Jordan, if all those guys get quality reps this spring and there's a consistency in getting the ball out on time, and when that receiver's making his break, the ball is on the way, your receivers are not going to drop as many passes. I mean, so I think when we talk about receivers, I know we want to talk about quarterback too. So let's just put that together. I think consistency in reps, we'll see improvement. That is what I would expect.
Yeah, Fish, what about you?
I think a big reason why the wide receivers have struggled is the inconsistencies at quarterback. These guys were all talented coming out of high school. I just can't imagine they're all bad. Jordan Young looked like he had a ton of talent coming out. I really like Destin Hill. I told you, I think Destin Hill was one of the top receivers in the country last year. Forget just in the Southeast. I think he was a top receiver. You look at the one wide receiver from Pensacola. You guys mentioned him before. I forgot his name, but he was Helton. He's coming off an injury last year, so I think he'll be back 100%. Another year away from leg injuries. It always takes about a year to come back from those for skill guys. He'll be back 100%. I like Helton a lot. They've got talent at that position. Plus, you have a guy like Cam McDonald that can't help out in the passing game. I just think as Milton goes, so does the rest of these guys. I think you'll see a major upgrade just because he's throwing the football and not some of the guys that did last year.
Bob, what about you? Position group that needs to improve the most on offense?
I feel awkward taking the bait here because there's two offensive linemen on the podcast, but I guess I'm going to jump at it. I guess my main thing is if Devontae Love-Taylor cannot play, then he becomes your grad assistant this spring. He becomes a guy who takes a Bryson Estes under his wing, takes a Lloyd Willis under his wing, that type of thing. And then you start to look at who are some of those younger guys who can settle in at tackle, who can just get some consistent reps. Going up against first team, second team defensive line, who are some of the younger guys at tackle who maybe they're not a natural tackle, maybe they are. I think Coach Atkins is going to find out this spring just who those options really are.
Yeah, and listen, going back to what you guys were talking about the passing game and effectiveness of the receivers and the quarterbacks, one of the things that Florida State does have to do is they have to shore up pass protection. They were not good in pass protection against the elite pass rushers in the ACC last year. You go look at what Miami's defensive ends and Pitt's defensive ends were able to do against Florida State. I do think that they will be better having another spring and another year of development. But the position I think is going to impact the offense the most will be tight ends. We talked to Mike about Jordan Wilson, and when Jordan's healthy, Mike thinks that he can help transform this offense into more of what he did at Memphis in the power running game. You really didn't have that true lead blocker. You had Wyatt Rector, who was in his first year as a tight end. You had Phillip Daniel, who was a walk-on that played a bunch. Cam McDonald is probably a better at the receiver part of being a tight end than he is a lead blocker, although he did do some, and he's willing to block. We've seen that in spring practice. So I would go with tight ends. I think that could really and they've got Jackson West in for the spring, early enrollee. So I think that position group can really help transform this offense and make it more of what Mike wants to do. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that group grows over the course of the spring and fall, particularly when Jordan Wilson gets back to 100% healthy. I'm going to stick on offense. If you had to pick a breakout guy on offense, Mark, who would you think is going to be? Who would be your pick for a breakout guy? A guy that maybe was not a significant contributor last year, or even a starter, but somebody that you're expecting to come on the scene or would like to see come on the scene in 2021.
Well, that's That's a good one. I got to go a couple different ways at this, but I'm convinced one of the better playmakers we may have is Cam McDonald, and we didn't nearly utilize him as much as I thought we could have last year. And a lot of that had to do with the quarterback. But I think he's a vertical threat. He's a matchup problem. He's an athletic guy who can catch the ball. And I just love the guy that, you can put in that tweener position. That's a matchup problem either way. And I think he could be a guy that could really open up this offense. I like that kid a lot. And I didn't think we used him enough last year.
Jerry?
Well, Pat, the tight end that you talked about, Wilson, I think he could be a big factor in this offense if he's healthy in the fall. I mean, he could be that guy that Mike's looking for at the tight end position. I think likely the breakout player is going to come from the wide receiver corps. Somebody has to emerge, and I'm not sure who it is.
I'm going to go with Pookie Wilson just because he's had flashes, enough of them from his freshman year to now, and I think now that Terry's gone and some of the other guys, he could kind of step up in that role and be the main guy. And I like him. I think he has a lot of ability. He's a good route runner, has pretty good hands. He's got pretty decent speed. So I'm going to go with Ontario Wilson as a breakout player on the offense.
Bob, what about you?
Hope when we're talking on, so let's say April 12th, we're talking about a receiver that is really broken out. It's got to be any receiver, maybe two. I'll go with Brian Robinson. I know that's Jerry's guy, but let's need to see a couple of these younger receivers, whether they're from the 21 class, 20 class. Somebody's got to really take that step forward.
Hey, let me interrupt you, Pat. Didn't Mike say today that they've moved Ja'Kai to
they have from running back to receiver? Yes, sir.
That's going to be interesting to watch his development.
Yeah, I think he could create a lot of problems in the slot for people trying to put him on strong safeties and linebackers. I think he could create a lot of mismatch problems on option routes and finding a spot in the zone. I think he could have a significant impact on the receiving core. And I think that I'm going to, since I'm hosting this show, I'm going to pick two guys. I'm going to go with Malik Mclean. I think I loved his film as a high school player. It's a very young receiving core. There's not a whole lot of proven commodities. And I think one of the true freshmen will break through. And then the guy that I really can't wait to see with the benefit of an offseason is Robert Scott at one of the tackle positions. I really think that, that kid learned a lot playing as much as he did this past fall. And when he was probably truly not physically ready to play offensive line at the major college level. So I would pick those two guys. How can you be a true freshman All-American and be a breakout player? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
He was 247 freshman All-American. He wasn't like AP or anything. So anyway, I'm picking. That's my guy.
Well, the question was an emerging player. He's emerged. He's done hatched.
But he was playing with one hand behind his back,
which makes it even more impressive. Come on, man.
All right, then I'm going to Malik McLean. I'm sticking with him. Keep on doing whatever you're doing, Robert Scott. It seems to be working for you. All right, so let's move over to defense. A lot of really young defense outside of the transfers. Really young defense. Don't have a lot of juniors. You got a lot of sophomores and redshirt freshmen. But who is your? And you got a lot of experienced guys to pick from that we don't know anything about really, other than what they've done at other places. So, Bob, you get the first pick on defense. Who is your breakout star on defense this spring?
I think honestly, you hope that it's one of those transfers. It's either Keir Thomas or the Georgia kid, Jermaine Johnson. The younger options, I think we're still kind of waiting and seeing. I know you love Derek Mcclendon as one example. Is that a guy?
Pick one.
All right. I'll give you I'm not going transfer. I'll go Mcclendon. I know Pat's high on him. I probably stole your guy, but I'm going Derek Mcclendon.
All right. Fish, defensive breakout star.
Travis Jay. I just think he has too much talent. I think Jay's one of the most gifted players. I just think the kid's got all the talent in the world. He just needs to, get it together mentally. But he's my guy, Travis Jay. I thought he was one of the top 5 players in the state of Florida when he came out of the state as a senior. So I'm sticking with it till he proves me wrong.
He's my guy too now. But Fish, what do you think held him back this past year? Because I'm just going to say, listen, the whole team was a train wreck last year, and let's move on. Like, I'm giving everybody a free pass. All right. I mean, let's not ask why stuff happened last year. All right. We're still all alive. That's all that matters. But honestly, I'm not going to blame any coaches or blame the players. Let's just say, Travis, we reset the button on him. He's super talented. Like, you've seen it in practice, I'm sure. The kid's got all the talent in the world. And let's just say this is really his rookie season. All right. Well, he would truly be a breakout because last year wasn't spectacular for him. So that would be
he battled injuries throughout last year too. He got hurt. He got banged up against Miami. I don't think he was 100% the rest of the year, really. I mean, we saw how depleted the secondary got towards the end of the, playing. I believe even Sidney Williams was playing a bunch of reps towards the latter part of the year. Another true freshman that really got thrown into the fire. Mark, who's your guy on defense? Breakout star.
I'm going with Jarvis Brownlee Jr. I think that dude is a player, and he showed flashes last year of athleticism, but what he showed more that I liked the most was attitude and confidence. And that's, to me, is so key to play corner, especially for FSU. And so, I'm looking for that dude to be a player for us for the next 4 years.
Can I jump in real quick? I just want to. All right. Mark brings that up, and one of the things when I do high school evaluations, we all know these kids can play on film or whatever. One of the things that I remember about Jarvis is Jarvis played in his final game at Carroll City, and it always sticks out. They lost, and he took his pads off, and the kid was devastated. I mean, losing meant so much to him. They had to carry him off the field, and he just loves football. And so one thing that when guys do these evaluations that gets overlooked because you don't get – that's what's so important about seeing these guys live. That always stood out to me, that kid loves football. Like, he'll die. He'd rather die than lose on a football field. Is that kid? So
I agree. I love everything I saw about him when he, competing for balls, athletic, can change direction. He's long. He can run. I mean, he's got it all. I just think this could be a great year for him, and he can anchor that secondary for a long time.
You guys remember this last year. If you remember this, I did that feature on Keyshawn Helton, and I asked him, who is the best defensive back on the football team? And if you all remember, Keyshawn said Brownlee, and we didn't see it during the season. But to your point, Mark and Fish, I think he could be an emerging player this year.
Yeah, and I'm going to stick in the secondary. I'm going to go with Brandon Moore, the UCF transfer. He's proven himself as a lockdown corner in major college football. Florida State has struggled tremendously against the pass for the last several years. And I think that kid has a chance to come in and lock down one receiver, which allows you to do some things on defense that they may not have been able to do over the last several years. So I will go with Brandon Moore, but it certainly sounds like we are secondary heavy on breakout stars. And I think that's exactly what FSU needs, given what they have up on the front now with Jermaine Johnson and Kerr Thomas joining Dennis Briggs and True Thompson and those guys. So, all right, let's go to the defensive position group that needs to improve the most from one year to the next going into this season. And Mark, we'll start with you on that and work our way back down. The position group on defense that needs to improve the most for Florida State to reach its potential next year.
Man. I got two in mind. I'm going to say defensive end, and of course those transfers are going to be key. But to Fish's point earlier, we got to generate some pass rush. I think we got some talent in the secondary, but it's not going to mean anything if the quarterback's not being forced to make quick decisions and throw some questionable balls so those guys can react and make plays. We got to get a pass rush. We got to pressure. We got to set the edge. Those always seem to be some of our biggest issues over the last several years. And so those guys got to be productive.
Jerry?
Yeah, I agree with Mark, as I stated earlier. And I'm going to change the question just slightly, Pat. The position that needs to emerge, but I'm most concerned about is going to be those two interior guys. We need to push in the middle too. And I'm not sure how good we're going to be there, but that we can save for another conversation.
Yeah, you got Dennis Briggs, Robert Cooper, Fabian Lovett, True Thomas is probably your top four going into spring there. Fish, what about you defensively? The position group that has to show the most improvement?
I mean, DN by far. I mean, I don't know. Did we see a sack dance last year? I mean, did any of these guys get to the quarterback? I mean,
I think the returning sacker has one sack. I think it's a tie between three guys.
And I think he fell into that.
Dude, for a team that has a history of sacking quarterbacks, I mean, it's just truly amazing. They had nobody on the team really have more than one or two sacks at the DN position. It's by far the most important position because it controls – if you have a pass rush and you could get just a pass rush with the front four, you don't have to blitz and do stuff to create that. Then the back end, which I think is the strength of the defense, I think you could have a major jump on defense this year. They could go from a very bad defense to a very respectable defense. And that Florida State should never be what they were last year. If they get a pass rush, you're talking a top 50 defense, top 40 defense, just with the pass rush.
Can I add to what Fish said just a second, Pat? Let me interject. Fish,
yeah, go ahead.
The other thing is, if our defensive ends need to contain the quarterback, I mean, we had just horrible containment last year in addition to a lousy pass rush. And you can't do that. And your secondary can't afford to have a quarterback running out there in space.
But I think a lot of that has to do with they had too many of the guys, like Janarius and Kando were basically the same type of guy, and you had both of them on the field. You really needed a guy that was more of a fast twitch guy on the other end. They didn't have that guy, whether that's going to be Patrick Payton or you're talking about Mcclendon. They need just somebody that's a little more athletic, doesn't get juked out of his pants every time a guy does a play. I mean, you need something on that other side. They had too many guys that are the same thing. They have like 5 guys at DN that are all, if you took them and lined them up, they all look the same. And they have the same strengths and they have the same weaknesses. They didn't have that. Brian Burns weighed 210 pounds, but he's twitchy. He can get off the ball quick. They need that one guy to. I don't know if it's a kid from Georgia, if it's one of the freshmen. Somebody needs to step up at that weak side defensive end and give them a pass rush off the edge for their. They just need one guy.
Can I get a witness?
Yeah, and listen, we talked about this a little bit when we wrapped up recruiting. After they signed the class, Patrick Payton and George Wilson are more in line with what they're looking at from a Fox defensive end, from an athletic. They have the versatility to rush the passer and play some coverage if needed when they use that as a hybrid position. But I think you're right. They seem to have a lot of guys that fit that strong defensive end mold, but not too many that are, that dominant rush in off the weak side. So I agree with you there. Bob, what about you?
I'll throw you a curveball. Adam Fuller. Adam Fuller got a year 0 in 2020. It's time now that his defense really steps up. It's time with the strength and conditioning, with a full spring. Yeah, I mean, there's no excuses this year. I think last year we could find a lot of reasons and excuses for the performance, the lack of leadership, the lack of a pass rush. But now the pressure is truly on Adam Fuller to pull them all together.
Yeah, and listen, I remember when Marcus Woodson said it was the best defensive back personnel group he's ever been with going into fall camp, and they didn't play that way for sure. I'm going to go to linebacker. They've got to shore that up. Is Emmett Rice a do you move him back into the middle? He's 230 pounds now. They struggled at middle linebacker. You played with a true freshman, Steven Dix, most of the year as your starter. Would really like to see them figure out a way to keep one of their best defensive players in the game all the time, Amari Gaynor. We saw him leave out of the games in situations that did not make any sense, that you could have found a way to utilize him. He was one of your best 11 players. So I want to see them find a permanent home for Amari, which I think would be Sam linebacker, or maybe as a Fox defensive end in pass rush situations. But certainly we're not very deep at linebacker last year. You really got nothing out of Deloach, McCray, or McCluster. You had three guys playing most of the time. DJ Lundy got some playing time as the season went along, but you really need someone to step up at Mike and Will linebacker. My estimation. This is a place that
was my other one that I was thinking about, and I'm reminded about the impact a tremendous linebacker can have on a football team when I watch like Devin White for the Bucks, and how he was at LSU, and how some of those guys are at Alabama, and how we used to have, with Brooks and Jones and all those guys that have come up through the years, sometimes you take those guys for granted until you don't have one. And those guys, those tackling machines, they clean up so many mistakes, the things that happen up front that guys make mistakes or lose contain, or a guy gets loose in the secondary. Those guys clean things up so much. And it would be so huge if one of those guys could emerge and just be a great tackling machine and play sideline to sideline.
Yeah. And I know we've been spoiled at Florida State because decade after decade after decade, there's been a dominant linebacker on Florida State's roster, and we just have not seen that. At least the 2013 team. Maybe there might have been a dominant linebacker on the 2014 team, but it has gone progressively downhill since then. So I think that position's got to step up. And listen, you're coming off a 3-6 season. There's lots of improvement to go around everywhere, right? I mean, there are questions at every position, and we will certainly get into that as we continue these podcasts. But I think that there's certainly a lot of there's key questions at every position, and it's going to make for a fascinating spring and fascinating offseason as this team, which has a lot of momentum right now, continues to build itself and what it wants to be for next year. Fish, I do want to ask you this question. I do want to get into a little bit of recruiting. They had a really good class, I think, for 2021, ranked 22nd by 247. Would have been higher had the transfers been brought in. We've discussed that at length, but I kind of want to talk to you about what they've done with the 2022 class and 2023 classes so far. And just what you think, what is this? Why are they having so much success and momentum in recruiting coming off a bad season and still stuck in what seems to be a long or forever lasting NCAA dead period?
I mean, last year was a perfect storm for why a lot of things went wrong. I think this year's kind of the same thing, but in the opposite direction. I mean, you look, Travis Hunter, for some reason, I was told originally he's from Florida and his whole family is Seminole fans. Well, this is a number one player possibly in the country that loves you, and no matter what, seems like he's locked into FSU, whether they won 3 games or not last year. So having a big-time kid like that already committed, and he's like the biggest cheerleader. This kid reminds me of like when Vince Williams and Carlos were getting recruited. They'd go on and basically promote FSU to everybody. Sam McCall, they got him. He committed early. If they don't fire the coach at Florida, Sam McCall is going to Florida. I forgot the guy's name. He was from that area, Polk County, but he goes and is now at South Carolina. Sam wants to play close to home, and one of my good friends that covers that area, Lakeland and Polk County kids, Florida State offer means more than even an Ohio State offer. These kids like Florida State in that area outside of Lakeland High School, which is a Gator hotbed. But Sam's a big-time player. So now you got 2 guys. You look at the Aaron Hester kid. His father played at Florida State. Marvin Jones, his kid played at Florida State. Dad played at Florida State. The Kelly kid is severely not only underrated, he may be the most underrated and underranked kid in the country. You're talking a guy that's probably borderline 5-star that Florida State just happened to find this kid. I mean, I knew about him, but 2 years, if you watch his sophomore film and you watch his junior film, the kid went from a good player to potentially one of the top DNs in the country. So everything's falling into place. You need a little luck. You need, and the one thing I've told people, and we've talked about this, Pat, and it drives me nuts, is you don't have to win 10 games to land top players to Florida State. Like, kids still want to play there. This idea that, you got to win 10 before they show up. This isn't Baylor before they got good, or Rutgers or Temple. I mean, like, I'm tired of people saying like this program's like some trash program that, oh my God, a kid's committing to Florida State. The big three schools in the state of Florida still hold a lot of water when it comes to kids wanting to play at these schools, And a lot of these kids still, if, people go, well, they didn't grow up watching them win. Well, their parents did, people, their family did. The people that are helping them decide did. So, like, come on, like let's be real. It still means something, but they've done a great job of getting, they got ahead of it. They knew that last year they were going to struggle with high school kids. And then I remember one of my contacts told me they were going to go heavily in the transfer market. And that was in October. They already knew, like, all right, the 21 class is pretty much done. They focused on this class, the 22 class, early last year when they knew the 21 class, they could only get so much out of it. And it's paying off. It's paying off. And you know what? Great players want to play together. So when one commits and another one commits, it's a chain reaction. Other guys want to play with great players. So they have these kids that they're recruiting are helping them recruit other great players. Florida State coaches right now, they're almost to the point that if they get somebody like A.J. Duffy, this ball's going to roll downhill. They're going to just have so much momentum, and that kid's going to help them carry on. And you've seen it before. Great players want to play with other great players. You've seen it. All it takes, the first one that started it after Bobby left that changed the momentum was Greg Reed. All of a sudden, you saw better players showing on campus. They'd show up multiple times. And then you just need that one guy that's going to change it. We talked about it. I think Mckenzie Milton was the first one to start that momentum in a positive way. But now Travis Hunter is like, he's their gives you legitimacy and credibility with name, image, and likeness. Somebody better start pocketing some money in Hunter's pocket because he deserves a paycheck. All right.
Yeah. Well, hey, let me ask you this, Fish. We saw the influx of transfers across the nation and in the new programs and how that affected the high school recruits. A lot of high school recruits were left without college homes at both the major college level and the FCS level because people were taking transfers. It looks like the one-time transfer rule will probably be approved this spring. And if that's the case, transfers will be a bigger impact recruiting classes more than ever before. How quick do you think Florida State gets its commitment? I mean, these kids are going to start latching on to spots. I think high school kids are going to start committing earlier than ever before. Do you think that's the way it's going?
It definitely. Listen, the transfer thing is great, but I thought I saw a stat like out of 17 or 1,800 kids that went into the transfer portal last year, only 200 kids signed. So it's still not like a lot of those kids are getting left out in the cold. I think it's a bad idea. Like, they needed to change the roster, so I get it. They went to the transfer portal. I don't think you can make a living off of just living off the transfer portal. You need guys. Football is not a one-year rental thing. A lot of your success, how many of those guys, whether it was LaMarcus Joyner or Telvin Smith, those guys tasted defeat and hated it. And those guys at a young age helped change the momentum of Florida State. These young guys are the ones that are going to change it. The guys that are coming in this year may get you to 7 wins, 8 wins maybe. Those young guys are going to get you to championships. And those are the ones that you got to build this team with. That's your foundation. You can't just bring in one-year rentals and think, oh, I'm going to win a national championship with these players. It's great to change the culture of the locker room, and you'll get more wins, and that's what they want to do. But these young Travis Hunter types are the ones that are going to help you win ACC and national championships.
All right. Well, with the one-time transfer rule, a kid can transfer anytime within his career. Do you think coaches will still be more inclined to go with an older, proven guy against a guy that's maybe unhappy with his playing time as a redshirt freshman or redshirt sophomore, because you can, with the one-time transfer, you will be able to bring in kids for multiple years. So I do think that there will probably be more of that than there has in the past. But do you think they'll continue to own the transfers to go towards a plug-and-play guy for 1 year, or do you think they'll start keeping tabs on recruits that sign elsewhere?
Well, the thing is, too, remember, it also depends on the roster. You can only, the 25-85 is also going to restrict. Yeah. You can't just bring in 25 new kids and then 25 like, you're going to have to decide how many of these kids and where they fit. Like, do you really, if a kid is a 1-year rental, hey, listen, if it doesn't pan out, it's no big deal. But if that kid has 2 or 3 years left and he doesn't work out, now you're sending him to the portal in a year. Like, you got to be careful. I'm huge on roster management. It's a one thing that when I break down FSU's roster, I think it's so important, one, to bring in so much of each position every year when you're recruiting, whether it's a quarterback, one running back. I hate last year that they didn't sign a high school running back. I hate it. I think you don't ever want to get in that position where you got to take 4 in 1 year to make up for that 1 year. Now, they got lucky that seniors were allowed to stay 1 more year, so it doesn't matter. But in the future, you don't want to have, like last year, they only signed 2 offensive linemen. I hate that. I believe you got to bring in 4 to 5 a year, to really – that when you sign – when you get into roster management and you undersign at one position, eventually it bites you in the ass. I don't care. I've seen it too many times, and that you go look at the wide receiver position. They had 1 year. I think they brought in 1 wide receiver, and the kid, I don't even know if the kid's on the team anymore, so.
Quarterback, just look at quarterback.
Yeah.
We signed quarterback for 2 years.
Exactly.
Look at where we are.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I do want to circle back to what kids you mentioned earlier, AJ Duffy, who I have a bad habit of calling AJ Curry for some reason. I think it's most of the time because I'm watching basketball when I'm talking about it. But AJ Duffy, we both love his film, and his film is as a sophomore. And I have said that his film as a sophomore is as good as Nico Marchio's as a junior and just as good as Chubba's and Tate's as a senior. FSU's in his top 4. He's supposed to announce possibly at the end of the month. What are you hearing about AJ?
I mean, it looks like FSU has a really, really legit shot because of the relationship with Dillingham, and I guess Norvell and his father are close. They have a shot. Now, I spoke to some people that still believe that Arizona State has a shot at him. The kid listed a top 4. He didn't list Arizona State. It's just quarterback's one position. You just don't see guys playing games. And the person I spoke to was like, he's tied to 247. He goes, well, the kid was upset that they put him in the crystal ball. I don't know if I buy that. Like, these quarterbacks are not the one position you expect a kid to be flaky in recruiting. If he didn't list them, I don't believe they're still in it. I don't know. Maybe I'm naive to the whole thing, but I think Florida State has a great shot. Now, the other kid that they just offered the other day that I really like is Taven Jackson, and he's my second favorite quarterback. I know he's only a 3-star, but I think a lot of that's because these guys haven't gone to camps and people have seen him. He's a big, tall kid out of Indiana. He's got a big arm. I think if he develops, will be a first-round pick. Now, a lot goes into that, but those are my 2 favorite quarterbacks. And FSU has I guess that kid's coming in April. So they're going to probably bring him in April. Duffy's supposed to commit at the end of March. If he commits, then maybe you still bring Jackson in just in case Nico decides, well, you know what, I don't want to be in the same class with AJ. You still recruit him. But they're in a good spot. They're recruiting at a position of strength. I love that. They took a guy early, and now they're shooting for the moon. I think that's how you recruit. You recruit at a position of strength. I hate this of, let's wait. No. Take guys, and if you can out-recruit them, then out-recruit them.
Yeah, and I know we both like the Thomas Castellanos kid from South Georgia, shorter guy, but boy, he is a football player. I don't know, he's short. That'll hurt him at quarterback. People will not, but he throws well from the pocket, outstanding athlete, looks like the best player on the field, no matter who he's playing against. But he is a quarterback. I mean, he's an athletic quarterback, but he is a quarterback. But he's also a guy that if he can't play quarterback for you, he's going to find his way on the field either at slot receiver, running back, defensive back. He'd be a heck of a take. And
size isn't as important now with quarterbacks. I mean, you look at Kyler Murray. If he's 5'8", 5'9", you look at Baker Mayfield's under 6 feet tall. It's just the game, because it's spread out and there's throwing lanes now. It's easier to throw for quarterbacks. I don't think the height thing's as big of a deal. I would take him as a quarterback, and if you have to move him, fine. But you turn on his film, he's electric, both with his arm and his legs. And I just don't think you could teach that stuff. That's something that is in that kid.
Yeah, I agree. And just sum up the 22 class so far, they are ranked 10th nationally, number 1 in the ACC based off the 6 commitments. If I had told you that Florida State would have a top 10 ranked class, coming out of last season, what would you have told me?
I would have told Jerry we need a Baker Act you. I think we need to get you, Jerry, man, we may need to get this guy on some medication, all right? So, because he's on something. There's something wrong with Pat, but definitely, yeah.
Fish, how do you account for it? I mean, we worried about these coaches not having the relationships because they don't have a Florida guy to speak of other than Odell and Dugans. But how do you account for it?
I just think if you can recruit, listen, like one of the best recruiters there's different guys, whether it was, you look at Coley when Coley was at Florida State. He landed Bjorn Warner in Connecticut. He landed the Cristo kid in California. He landed the kid, Dustin Hopkins out of Texas. If you could recruit, you could go in any area and recruit. I just think this idea, it's nice to have some guys on the staff that have connections, but at the end of the day, you either can close or you can't. I've seen guys, I don't care if you're black, you're white, you're purple, you're green. Like there's one guy at Georgia right now, this guy Hartley. If you ever met him, you would never know, but the guy's one of the elite recruiters in the country. He shows up in like a sports car to the high schools. I mean, like kids like it. He has a great personality. Like everybody has a different stick. And every guy that's good at recruiting, they don't all come the same. They don't all look the same. Everybody recruits kids differently. But if you can recruit, and Florida State, listen, the logo gets you in the door. And I always said the logo gets you to the front of the line. All right. It doesn't mean kids are going to commit to you. It gets you to the front of the line. I mean, Pat worked at USF. Like that's recruiting and that's evaluating. Like you were at the back of the line behind all the big guys going, man, let one of those kids slip through. Just let one of them slip through and you're going to be happy. You just waited for the kids to go, at Florida State, you're at the top of the line. Now, as a coach, you just can't screw it up. Don't screw it up. And we've seen those coaches at Florida State that in the past that have screwed it up. Like you're I don't want to mention them, but there's one of them I used to call the magician because he used to recruit kids and they disappeared after their visits. But all you could do is screw it up, and just don't do that. And I think if kids know that you're telling the truth, they have an opportunity. Listen, FSU has one thing kids want to know: can I start early? We already know all these kids that they're recruiting this year have a chance to play year one. They're that good, and as long as you're honest with them. And listen, Florida State, it's still a brand name. A lot of kids want to go. They like the Tomahawk stuff. They like going to that stadium. I mean, you were there when they played Oklahoma that year. How many places does the atmosphere get like that across the country? You get that place rocking. Kids want to still play there. I mean, and with coronavirus, a lot of these kids want to stay close to home now. Look at what happened. Miami had 6 wins in Manny's first year, and they pulled off a phenomenal class last year. It wasn't by accident. A lot of it had to do with COVID. So COVID's helped them this year because Sam McCall can't go on visits. Travis Hunter can't go on these visits. The Kelly kid can't go on visits. These kids by now have already had 4 or 5 trips. I mean, remember, they've missed out on junior days. They've missed out on so many different on-campus stuff. So you know what? You go with what you're comfortable with. Florida State's comfort right now. And a lot of it's, there's, like I said, while a lot of that hurt them last year, it's helping them this year.
Yeah, and now I can't believe I'm about to broach this subject, but I am. I want to talk about some guys that are not even in their junior year of high school yet. Florida State's got 3 commitments for 2023 already, which we got guys that will be juniors next fall. But the one guy I want to talk about is a legacy. And I don't want to talk about him because he's a legacy. I want to talk about him because he's one of the most impressive sophomores I've seen on defense, and that's Lamont Green Jr., whose father was an All-American linebacker at Florida State. We can get into Cedric and Gabe. We got 2 years to talk about the rest of these guys, but just talk. Both you and I watched his tape, and just tell a little bit about what you think about Lamont and his pass rushing ability at such a young age.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing you talk about in-person evaluation, I don't know if you guys have met him yet, but he's almost as bigger than his dad. He's 14. I mean, he's wide shoulders, big hands, length, and then you go watch him. He's super explosive. I think he's a better athlete than Lamont ever was. Lamont was a big linebacker that probably should have grown into a defensive end at Florida State, but he was one of those kids, hey, they sold him on playing linebacker, and that's where he wanted to play. And you've seen that so many times where kids don't play the position that really should be projected at. Lamont Green's kid can play 3 positions. He can play DN with his hand down, he can play outside rush end, or he can play outside linebacker. He's long, he's athletic, he's explosive. He could drop back into coverage. He could help in the passing game. He's a guy you already look at him, he's a guy that could cover a tight end. There's not a lot of DBs that could cover tight ends or linebackers. He has a chance. If in baseball they call it a 5-tool athlete or guy in baseball, he's like that 5-tool athlete. He could do everything, and if he develops to the way his potential says, he could be a first-round pick one day.
Right. Well, I do. Before we close out, I do want to move on to some off-the-field stuff, and this is for Jerry and Bob, whoever wants to take the question. But I know Florida State announced plans to continue moving forward with possibly bringing on a football-only facility, and I know there's some talk about maybe some stadium renovations. What can you guys tell us about that?
Yes, Florida State has been studying a football operations facility for years now, several years. And what they're talking about at this point is designing a standalone facility that would either be located in the original site that they had decided on that would attach to the indoor practice facility, or another optional site. I have a feeling that it'll wind up in the original site. Now, they're moving forward rapidly with that design and plan. The boosters have been raising money for it, Pat, for a while now, and they've raised $38 million in pledges. They don't have nearly that much in cash payments on it yet. But I think once they announce the final plan that this is it, there's a lot of money standing on the sidelines waiting to see what they're going to do. And as soon as they announce it, I think you'll see a lot of cash payments being made towards that facility. Originally, that facility was a $60 million facility, but with the cost of construction, what it is today, I see that thing being upwards of $80 million or more.
Okay.
So, but yeah, that's the current plan with the football operations facility.
Now, have we heard anything about what they're projecting as far as attendance for next year? Limited attendance? Are they going to try to go 100% attendance in the fall, or have there been any news on that yet? Yeah,
they're projecting 100% attendance next year, so they're in full sales mode. I think the feeling is that with the vaccine becoming more, predominant, and maybe the curve heading in the right direction, that they'll be able to fully have 100% attendance.
All right, guys. I'm not sure I've ever been this excited about a 3-6 football team going into spring practice, but I am definitely cannot wait to see how this team transpires with a lot of positive energy in Tallahassee, not only about the additions to the roster, but also what's coming down the line for 2022 and 2023. We will be back next week to talk a little bit more about each position as Florida State starts spring football on Tuesday, and we'll practice on Thursday and I believe Saturday as well. It will be afternoon practices this spring as opposed to the morning practices they had last spring. But certainly exciting time around Florida State with basketball season wrapping up their regular seasons and getting ready to head into conference play. Baseball's got a big series against Virginia this weekend as they try to get their first ACC win. And, of course, the softball team's got Florida this weekend as well. And so it's a great time to join the Osceola. If you're not a subscriber, please go to theosceola.com and go to the subscription page and use the discount code FSU20 to get 20% off annual subscription rate. If you do not want to be an annual member, we have a monthly rate at $6.95 that you can try us out. But it's a busy time of year at Florida State and for the Osceola. And we are certainly appreciative of Alumni Hall coming on as our sponsor here. And we will be back next week with another edition of the Seminole Sidelines podcast presented by Alumni Hall. Thanks, guys.
This has been another edition of the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines. To subscribe to the Osceola, go to theosceola.com. Go Noles!